Well, first off, Alan, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate the perspectives from other practitioners that we've been able to bring into this course over the course of this semester. And let me just take a moment and run down your bio for the benefit of the people that were here. And actually, you guys, if you wouldn't mind moving over here so we can get somewhere on camera so you can see y'all. Welcome. I think that'll just work better logistically. Let me run down a little bit of a bio of Mr. Alan Gassman for the benefit of the folks here in the room. And we did send your 400-page PowerPoint around to the folks here, so they got the full version of what you, at least they have it in their files. They got the full version of what you condensed down for the benefit of us here today. We really appreciate that. And for the benefit of those in the room, Mr. Gassman is the name partner / founder / man about town in Clearwater of the Gassman, Crotty, and Gianicolo law firm. Did I say that right?
Close enough.
Excellent. Mr. Gassman is board certified in wills, trusts, and estates. He is by the Florida Bar, which that's kind of a big deal. He's an accredited estate planner and a prolific author of over 200 articles, symposia, textbook chapters, books themselves. One of such books you all got a copy of for free from Mr. Gassman, which is awesome. And he is also a general prince among men out there in the world of estate planning, tax law, and business law generally. And we really appreciate the opportunity to have worked with Alan and his law firm over the years. It's been great to know that we have a person that we can call down in Clearwater, which is where I grew up, frankly. It's when we have clients that have issues down there. So, Alan, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure.
We appreciate it. So, I know you got this PowerPoint, and I did take the time to look through the 400-pager you sent over, and it is chock full of awesome things. I mean, essentially what you sent us was soup to nuts, beginning to end, how to start and run a law firm, which was absolutely amazing. I know I read a fair bit myself, just trying to get a little bit better every single day, and a lot of what you put in there were things that I'd come across and things that I hadn't come across, and all distilled, a lot of wisdom distilled into that document. But I appreciate the time that it took. I know how long it takes to run that kind of information through your own mind, apply it in your own life, and then take the time to share it with others in a way that's digestible to hopefully improve their lives. So thank you so much for sending us that and for taking the time to work through all that.
No problem.
So I know you've got the condensed version here that I think you want to run through that PowerPoint here with us today. But before we do that, if you would just take a moment and tell us a little bit more about yourself and let the folks in the room here know how you got to be where you are and helping people with their estates and their business situations and all that jazz.
Okay, and by the way, Steve, we don't have to cover my PowerPoints at all. I'm more than glad just to answer questions and follow your agenda. I just thought you might be interested in a couple of these things. I started reading the Wall Street Journal in 7th grade, and I got in trouble in 7th grade biology. Teacher wrote a note to my parents, and they called her, and she goes, between you and me, he's not going to be a good scientist. Looks like he'll be a good lawyer or accountant because he keeps reading the Wall Street Journal. Don't take the Wall Street Journal away from him. So I just really had a great interest in business and a great interest in human dynamics, and then went to law school. And during law school, I was a runner for a law firm. And I just found the tax lawyers to be pretty quirky. They seemed to have a good thing going. They seemed to have a nice intellect. And I decided I wanted to be a tax lawyer. So I got the undergraduate accounting degree as sort of a backup and to get more information about business and business law. Then I went up to University of Florida, got a law degree, and then after that I was able to get into the LLM program at the University of Florida. And that LLM really gave me a big edge when I got out into the world. I mean, you can be a successful estate planning and tax lawyer without the LLM. I'm absolutely sure of that. But the LLM was a great investment for me and for most of the lawyers who have worked with me. The ones who have that LLM really get a lot out of it. So I went to the LLM program at Florida, and I actually reached my level of incompetency in the LLM program, in part because it normally starts one semester and then the second semester, and I started reverse. And I started after a big tax law change, so I didn't know the tax law. So basically what I like to tell people is I graduated 6th in my class from the Florida LLM program, but there were only 7 of us, and the 7th guy didn't graduate. The 7th guy failed. The 7th guy failed and had to stay an extra semester. And it's interesting now that when we look back and I look at the names of the people who were ahead of me in the class, who's the most successful of all of us? The guy who failed. And who appears to be the second most successful? Me. So it's not just IQ, and it's not just ability, and it's not LSAT score, and it's not law school grades. You know, it is just doing the right things at the right time, getting into the right habits, really liking what you do, having a sincere interest in your clients and your referral sources. That means so much more than what you're being graded on now. And of course, there's no other way that you can be graded now, but from an academic skills standpoint. But I can tell you, the other thing you're doing while you're there is you are hopefully working on yourself. Because the only one who's going to get in your way from a lifetime of success, both personally, business-wise, and in the law, is going to be you. So I really want you to think about, you know, what's going to make you a successful lawyer, if that's your career goal, and what you need to do to get there. And this is not a sprint. It looks like a sprint, it feels like a sprint, but believe me, this is not a sprint. Because, you know, look at from my side, I'm 57 years old, I'm 33 or 34 years out of law school, and the key things I did had nothing to do with what year I did them in. So I just don't want you to feel pressured. I don't want you to feel like you have to do anything right away. I know a lot of really successful lawyers who failed the bar a couple times, you know, who went bankrupt, who got divorced twice. Now you want to try to avoid those type of experiences both for you and your clients, but I really want you to understand very clearly that whatever goal you want to reach, you can make that thing happen if you have good habits and if you have a steadfast attitude. So that's my hello, that's who I am.
Alan, that's wonderful. You know, I wish that I had internalized that kind of a thought process, you know, so long ago when I graduated law school, which was not all that long ago, but long enough. But, you know, you said the words that it feels like a sprint. It seems like a sprint. And it sure as heck did. It absolutely did. I felt like I had to run as fast as I could to develop some kind of a name for myself, something that I could sell out there into the great wide world. And looking back, I mean, I'm at a point now where a lot of the things that I did when I was, you know, almost running in place were, I mean, it's sort of helped me get where I am now. But looking back, I think I could have gotten a lot farther if I hadn't been so hysterical about it when I was a brand new lawyer, you know, thinking, oh my God, there's this gaping chasm of I have no book of business underneath my feet. I think I would have been a lot better off chilling out. So I appreciate your perspective on that. Let me ask you, you know, of course, now you're running your own law firm. You have a wonderful reputation, and it's kind of hard, I think, when you see somebody that's in your position, which is an enviable position. You're extremely well known. You've written a lot. People know your name because of everything that you've done. But when you're first starting out, it's kind of hard to see the connection between starting out at zero and becoming one's own version of Alan Gassman, right? So
Mhm.
what did it look like when you started? Did you start out by hanging out a shingle, or were you working for a bigger law firm, or what did that progression look like? Because the gap in the middle, I think, is sometimes the hardest thing to figure out for people.
Okay, well, my journey was pretty interesting. I graduated in 1983. The interest rate was 17.5%. The country was just entering into a pretty big recession, and I couldn't find a job. I was from Orlando. My family knew a lot of lawyers in Orlando. I had a big notebook of letters that I was sending to all these law firms, and I could not find a job. I finally found a job paying $23,500 a year in Clearwater, Florida, with a four-lawyer firm, and they knew nothing about tax and very little about estate planning. But they figured that since I had an LLM in tax, I could be a tax lawyer. Little did they know that you don't know enough when you get out of your LLM program to actually be a tax lawyer right away. So my first year, my revenues were $53,000. And I worked 70, 80 hours a week. And I basically had to teach myself. There were some tax lawyers I met who would tell me a little bit here or there. I read every book I could get my hands on. But the other thing I did was I went to lunch with every CPA I could find. 3-4 days a week, I was going to lunch with CPAs. And I was doing as much work as I could for them and their clients. I was very honest about what I knew and what I didn't know. And I found 2 different CPAs my second year of practice who were actually willing and very, very willing to explain to me how things work with clients. So they would line me up to see their clients. They would meet with me before I met with the client to tell me what I needed to do and say. They would meet with me after the client left to tell me what I needed to do and say. And they were just really good to me. And what they got in exchange was a friendship, the ability to mentor a younger lawyer, and also I was referring them a lot of clients. So the recession kept getting worse. My real estate-based law firm kept getting worse and worse. My third year, I think I brought in $170,000, and they were only able to pay me $55,000. I had a wife and a child, and I just went on my own. When I went on my own, I became the least expensive tax lawyer in Clearwater, Florida. Because that's what I needed to do to get business. I leased mini warehouse space right next to the California Closet Company for $3 a square foot. My overhead was $25,000 a year. I had a secretary who was in a kitchen. I shared a receptionist with another tax lawyer's wife. I found out later why he didn't want to practice with his wife. The California Closet Company cut wood from 3 to 5 p.m. every afternoon, so I couldn't have phone conversations or meetings from 3 to 5 p.m. because there would be this buzzsaw going off. But what I found was that my wealthy clients had absolutely no problem with this because I said, look, I got to support myself. I've got to support Marcia and Nicole. I'm at the lowest overhead here. I can be at a lower hourly rate than you've been paying. What do you think? And they were all absolutely fine with it. They were absolutely fine with it, as were my referral sources in the community, because the community is always going to root for the underdog. So that's how I got started. I started off with half a secretary, then I got really busy. I had the secretary in the kitchen. I had my wife Marcia doing the books and the business end of things. And then it just grew gradually, over time until today. So I'm still using a lot of the same systems I used my first day out, but almost every year we would tweak something, or we would change something, or we would increase our fees. So it's just been a gradual rise.
That is an incredible story. Yeah, I especially love the idea, the image. It's so vivid of, you're doing your tax stuff, and these buzz saws going off in the next room. Frankly, I would love that kind of an excuse to not have to take calls and deal with clients between 3 and 5. I mean, I don't know about you, but I am great in the morning. I am less great after 2 p.m. It just kind of is what it is. Um, Something that you mentioned there, I think is really powerful. I mean, the fact that you went into that firm waving around a credential. I have this fancy LLM. I've got this thing. People think that when you're stamped with a credential that it means something. It doesn't mean anything. It's a sometimes necessary but never sufficient condition. So that got you in the door. That was the necessary condition to get you in the door with that particular law firm, but it was nowhere nearly sufficient for you to be competent. And you did two things that I think are critical. One, you taught yourself. You took it upon yourself to teach yourself what was needed and what was necessary. And the second thing is you went and found mentors. And I think you did the best thing you could possibly do with seeking out CPAs who are the boots on the ground for tax work and for first level business advising for the clients that the people in this room all want to get, myself included. I love the relationships that we built over the years with CPAs, and a lot of the credibility that I've been fortunate enough to start out with in Tallahassee comes from my firm and the established relationships with people like Bob Pierce and Ken Hart, at my law firm. It almost seems a strength for the way that you went about it, because you would develop those relationships from the beginning, one-on-one, in person, and found those mentors, which were not to be found within your firm. When I look at that, I see a lot of strengths being built that were personal to you and not tied to anybody else's idea of you working for them. I think that's an incredible story, Alan. I appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah, let me mention a couple things also. There is no doubt that the most important thing in the first 2 or 3 years of practice is developing good habits, learning how to practice, and developing a reputation. So you realize I didn't say making money. I didn't say making a lot of money. If I could go back, and if I could have made $100,000 a year my first 3 years instead of $180,000 in total my first 3 years, I would never ever trade that, because the experience, the reputation, and the relationships are so much more important. So just tell the student loan people to wait, because you really need to get your table built with those firm shares. The other thing I did was with the same fervor that I pursued friendships and mentorships with CPAs, I also pursued physician clients. And what I did was I realized that physicians really cared most about asset protection. They needed a lot of different services, but what would bring them in the door was asset protection. So I became the asset protection authority and the tax law authority in my area in Clearwater, Florida. I hired one of the doctor's wives, who was a public relation person, to give me advice. She set up dinners that I could speak at, and I started sending fax alerts to doctors once a week or twice or every other week. Anything new that would apply to a doctor, I sent a fax alert to all the doctors. And I sent them 2 faxes. There was the fax alert and then a separate exact copy, but across the top it said "copy for a friend." And it took me, after about 15 years, I had 1,000 physician clients. I did a great job for them, fast turnaround, reasonable, really cared for them. And then I had a client that I could refer to the CPAs, and the CPAs would do a great job for them. So we would just have a great team going. So I pursued, that niche of medical law. I know enough about health law. So, it would not have been enough just for me to know tax law and corporate law and estate planning law. I also needed that separate health law niche. And when the economy has been terrible, doctors have always been good, at least for me. So, pursuing multiple specialties is another thing that you can consider based upon what you're interested in.
That's excellent to hear. I mean, it strikes me that when you're trying to unravel that marketing puzzle, and I'll just use that word, marketing puzzle, there's no right answer, and there's no formula, and what works for, we'll just consider only lawyers in this context, what works for lawyer A is not necessarily going to work for lawyer B. I mean, we've all been dealt different cards in our native skill set and what we're interested in, and it's a matter of not wishing that you had different cards, but how you're arranging the ones in your hand. And it sounds like you did everything that you could to play those cards that you had in your hand versus trying to make yourself something that you weren't, right?
Absolutely. The other thing I'm going to say is that generationally, my generation and Steve's generation, we were raised by parents that said the more you work, the better you are. So someone who works a 60-hour week is actually better than someone who works a 40-hour week. I mean, that was the value system that my parents, who were born during the Depression, gave to me. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard about the 10,000-hour rule, but basically, if you really like something and you do it for 10,000 hours, you become a genius in that area. And if you study history, you see Steve Jobs, you see Bill Gates, you see the Beatles. These are all people who got 10,000 hours in before their peer group did. Because Gates and Jobs had parents who took them to university centers where there were computers for a 13 and a 14-year-old to play with. No one else had that. The Beatles got jobs in Hamburg and had to play 18 hours a day. The Beatles had played 2,300 concerts before they ever cut a record. So those first 3 years, you can get your 10,000 hours in. If you're a 9-to-5er, it's going to take you 4 to 5 years. So just understand that, and then also understand our generation. That, when I hire a lawyer and she comes in at 9 and she wants to leave at 5, I say, boy, I'm glad I only pay her a percentage of revenues because I'm not paying her nearly as much. She's not making half as much as the person who works the longer hours. So, I mean, that's just another fact of life I'll roll out for you as it comes to mind.
Excellent. I appreciate that perspective. I would like to pivot. You've got a lot in this PowerPoint that's specific to the types of things we've been talking about and to your approach to estate planning. If you would like to throw that up there, I think your tech guy has the ability to do that. We can talk through it, or everybody has a hard copy version of it here, or we could go through it like that. What would you prefer?
Yeah, we can go through the hard copy. I think you can just look down at the hard copy. I don't think we don't need to show it on the screen. So if you go to page 3, and oh, by the way, the cover, I've got my picture on there. When I graduated from law school, it was really tacky to put your picture on anything, but people's brains want to see a picture. So it's absolutely fine to put your picture on an email or to put your picture on a presentation. People want to see another person. So that's absolutely fine. The second page tells you that on February 11, I got together with one of my mentors and heroes, a retired law professor named Srikumar Rao, and we gave an 8-hour law practice success workshop at Stetson Law School, which I hope I can give at FSU someday. And the video of that presentation and also the PowerPoint is available. You have the 400 and some odd page PowerPoint, but check out the video, check out Sri Kumar Rao on YouTube. He's one of the most brilliant thinkers of our time, and he can show you how to be more productive and actually have a good time under stressful situations. Because let's face it, we're all going to have stressful situations. That's part of the human predicament. So I welcome you to go to YouTube. If you search YouTube Gassman Stetson, YouTube Stetson Gassman Rao, or any of those words in combination, you'll see these that just came up, and I think you'll enjoy them. Now, page 3 is a fact of life having to do with business, and that is your law practice and the law practice that you go to work for is going to be limited by its weakest link. So I'm showing 5 hot air balloons, because as lawyers we all have lots of hot air. But I want you to know that, and when you go into your, by the way, I want you to think about, you don't have a legal practice yet, but the chances are you're all going to be working for one. So what I'm saying here are things that are important, because when you go into that legal practice and you start applying these things, they're going to applaud. And then eventually when you have your own practice, it's going to work well. But these balloons are your personal life, which cannot be a mess. You're going to have to learn how to make sure your personal life is not a mess. And then your professional talents and skills as a lawyer. And then your clients. If you don't have great clients, it's not going to work. You can start with mediocre clients, but eventually you're going to want to build to great clients. And then your team. Initially you may work alone, but if I didn't have 28 other people working in this law firm, my income would be probably 25% of what it is. Not necessarily because I make a lot of money from the people who work here with us, but because I'm able to do just the thing that I really like to do, that I'm really, really good at, and I don't have to do all the things that I don't like to do and that I'm not good at. So that's part of the enjoyment of the law practice, but it's also part of the ability. Because different people have different abilities. I'm really good at telling a paralegal what to put in a document and how to put a package together. I'm terrible at doing that myself. I'm really good at making a mess of things and rushing through things and making them happen, but I'm really bad at organizing them later. So for anyone with one particular talent, there's other people with other talents to complement them. And that's part of what a team is about. And then finally, there's the structures. If you don't have good forms, if you don't know how to use them, if you don't have a good procedure as to what to do when a client calls on the phone and they need something, if you don't have a good billing system, then you really can't succeed. So when you interview with the law firms, learn all you can, tell me about your team, tell me about your systems. Tell me about the personalities of your lawyers. Tell me about what you like about your clients, because those are these are really important things. And you can think about these things now in terms of where you are now in life. You know, what do you need to do to square away your personal life? You know, all the situations that you face now are great training for what you're going to have. You're going to have loves, you're going to have heartbreaks, you're going to dicker with your parents and with your in-laws. So learn how to get that squared away. My daughter is a college psychologist at New College, and I so wish that when I was in law school I could have seen a counselor. I don't think they had counselors back in the 1980s for law school students or even undergraduate students. So you know, we all have 800-pound gorillas in our lives. And there's 2 things about that. Number 1, when I come into my law practice, I don't worry about what's going on outside of my law practice. I compartmentalize it and I'm busy in my law practice. But number 2, for my personal issues, I get them handled. I know now after 57 years that you go and you handle those things. One of the things I tell my young physician clients, and I'm off on a tangent here, but I think it's important, is, you know, just don't be married to a psychopath. You can love somebody and that caveman or cavewoman brain can really tell you to marry them and all, but if they can't stay sober or they're abusive or they just can always find a way to not work or they're really, really negative, just get out of the relationship, you know? Call it a practice marriage. It's better to have a second marriage that's a good one than a first marriage that's really bad. So, it's kind of none of my business to come and talk to you about legal success. But I have the same approach in the conference room with my clients. Because when I sit down in the conference room with the client, I want to know what their 800-pound gorilla is. I want to know what their team situation is. I want to know what their professional situation is. Because I want to be the best professional friend that I can be. So when I get together with a client, I'm very much in tune with what they came to me for, but I'm also very much in tune with how I can help them professionally. So what does that mean? I know what their hot buttons are. I know what their loves are. I know what their challenges are. And I do everything I can to be a very trustworthy confidant. There's been a lot of tears shed in this room that I'm sitting in. There's been sad tears. There's been tears of joy. There's been